comparison alternatives is the highest converting out of any, including category keywords. People only do this one thing, which is the competitor name versus themselves, but there's a bunch of others. So let's look through some of these examples. You take bucket one. Somebody is Googling your competitor's name versus you. Either you're leaving that conversation to the competitor who has a versus page for you versus them. That's obviously going to sell them. Or you leave it to like the G2 crowds of the world, and you're going to be nowhere to be found, and it's just going to be a sales pitch to go with someone else. So you want to be part of that conversation, and you're going to get conversions from it. So today we want to discuss the second bucket or group of pain point SEO or bottom of funnel keywords, what we call comparison and alternative keywords. Just as a recap, if you haven't already, we have an earlier episode. Wherever you're listening to this, it will be there as well on category keywords. So we wanted to go through in this kind of mini series of just the three buckets of what we call pain point SEO keywords. You can go back and listen to the category keywords one. And today we're going to be talking about comparison and alternatives. As a reminder, if you like this series, a couple things, please like and subscribe us if you're watching on YouTube, and also hit subscribe and or leave us a review if you're watching or listening on a podcast channel. You can also subscribe to our newsletter where we share other articles that we don't even get into on this show and the podcast and YouTube, case studies and in-depth articles at growandconvert.com/newsletter. Okay, comparison and alternatives. Let's start off by just kind of reviewing the pain point SEO pyramid. And I will share my screen for those of you that are watching. We'll just explain everything out loud for those of you that are just listening. So the pyramid is the classic marketing funnel schematic. We talked already about category keywords. We put comparison alternatives schematically at the bottom of the pyramid right next to category keywords because we think from an intent standpoint, both of them, just to refresh, category keywords is something like accounting software or marketing analytics tool. And comparison alternative would be Google Analytics alternatives for marketing analytics tools. Like if you're selling another analytics tool, both of those would be viable keywords. And we think that the intent level is just as high as category keywords, but
well, I would say they're even higher. And so, yeah, in terms of the conversion rate of comparison and alternatives keywords, these are the highest converting pieces that we produce for clients. And so, yeah, we wanted to cover like what types of keywords should you target, because most people just do when they're thinking about comparing themselves to a competitor. And we wanted to discuss a few other category types within comparison alternatives, and then explain how we write them, because I think we do this a little bit differently than how most people typically do it. So a lot of people would use a landing page to do their versus pages or talk about comparisons. We typically use blog posts. And then another differentiator in terms of how we do these pieces is that a lot of people give equal weight to all of the companies that they're listing. And we do not do that. We actually think you should sell yourself with more real estate in the blog post. And so we'll show a few examples of how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, three types of comparison and alternative keywords we're going to go after, or we're going to talk about today, is competitor name versus you. And as you just alluded to, that's the one that we see a lot of other people do as well. A lot of people do that. Like create a bunch of landing pages. It's like linked to in the footer of different competitor names versus them and their brand name. Number two, and this is one we see basically nobody who is not a Grow and Convert client or reader do, which is competitor name versus competitor name, neither of which are you. And you might be like, what? We'll explain and show an example or talk through an example. And lastly is just competitor name space alternative or space competitors, meaning somebody is looking, that's like Google Analytics alternatives if you're some analytics software. And I'm showing a graph. For those of you listening from our SEO conversion rates piece, we've talked about this piece a couple times. We'll link it in the notes like we sort of always do, where it has the conversion rate for different types of pain point SEO keywords. And we split out in this study, compare the alternative ones, which is, competitor name space alternatives, and versus into two bars in this bar graph. And comparison alternatives is the highest converting out of any, including category keywords, including jobs to be done, that we'll record a separate episode on one day. So I just want to mention, like, people only do this one thing, which is the competitor name versus themselves, but there's a bunch of others. So let's look through some of these examples.
Before we go to the examples, I think we should cover why to even do these. So there's a lot of companies, when we tell them about this strategy, that they'll object and say, we don't really want to talk about our competitors. What would be your answer as to why to do those?
Yeah, let me actually elaborate even more. If we said why to that question, it's like, well, why would we give screen real estate to them? Or they almost don't even think about it in a Google way. I feel like when clients object like that, they're just like, why would we even mention a competitor's name on our blog? That's insane. It's like almost like this is our real estate on our blog. Like, it's like, I guess I almost interpret it as they think it's like almost kind of like putting themselves lower.
Or it's marketing their competitor. That's also often what they think is, why would we talk about one of our competitors? Why would we tell why would we tell our potential prospects about one of these competitors, especially if they're better in certain areas or things like that?
So to answer your question, my answer is very simple, which is this is for Google. Like, this is SEO we're talking about. So people are Googling these keywords. Like, again, 3 buckets: competitor versus you, competitor versus competitor, or competitor space alternatives. So if they are Googling this, and this is happening whether you write something or not, you have a choice. You can stay on the sidelines, write nothing, and let whatever the heck else is ranking on Google control that conversation, or you can be part of that conversation. Obviously, you want to be part of that conversation. You take bucket 1. Somebody is Googling your competitor's name versus you. Either you're leaving that conversation to the competitor who has a versus page for you versus them, and then, like, that's obviously going to sell them. Or you leave it to, like, the G2 crowds of the world and those kind of review sites, which admittedly, like, when we're recording this, like, Google's doing an update and maybe some of those are going down, but I'm seeing it all over the SERP still, G2 crowds. And those are terrible, because the reality there is they will show a bunch of competitors that you've never heard of, because it's smaller businesses that are paying G2 for those top spots, and you're going to be nowhere to be found. And it's just going to be a sales pitch to go with someone else. So you want to be part of that conversation, and you're going to get conversions from it. Plus, we show the conversion graph, and usually clients are like, okay, cool. Like, I want those conversion rates. The other flavor or part of that complaint or objection is also sometimes not even like, we don't want to give our competitors, like, airtime or whatever on our blog, but it's also, hey, the CEO is friends with that CEO, or like, we've had some legal run-in with them or something, and they're just like, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want them to get mad at us. Like, we don't want to cause legal issues for ourselves. In that case, I mean, Benji, you can answer it now. I was planning on showing some of these examples, but the short answer is we have had plenty of success as per that bar graph, and I don't know, how many of these keywords must have we done over the years for clients? Hundreds?
A lot, yeah.
Without ever trashing the client's competitors. Let's put an asterisk on that statement. With mostly very vanilla discussion of our clients' competitors. And the asterisk is more like, there are some clients that are like, IDGAF, like, we're okay being a little bit harsh. And it's sort of like, we have been successful, let's put it this way, writing about our clients' competitors at the level of boldness or brashness that the client is comfortable with. Very few. Some of them are like, let's just go at them, I don't care. Great. Those are actually kind of fun. The vast majority are like, be extremely politically correct, please. Like, don't say anything bad. And it works totally fine. And we'll show examples of how to do that. So we showed this graph. Let's start with bucket number one, or sort of type of comparison keyword number one, which is the most classic one, which is a competitor's name versus you. In this case, Circuit is a client we've had was a client a while back. We had or have a whole case study about them on our blog. This is one such example. They make a route planning tool. So for like delivery drivers and stuff, they have a bunch of routes for the day, and optimizing the order in which you do that and such is important. And so they make a tool for that. Route Excel is the competitor. And in this case, the keyword we're going after, or we were going after, is Route Excel versus Circuit. What I want to say here is just a simple, like, this is a very common sense, make sensey type of keyword from a strategy perspective. As we said, this is the one that we see a bunch of companies, even ones that aren't in the grow and convert universe, do with landing pages. What I want to say is you don't have to do it via a landing page. You can, and your chances of ranking for this is ridiculously high because the search term we're talking about has your brand name in it. So it should be no problem ranking regardless of a landing page or blog post. But I just wanted to say, think about whether a blog post could convert better. And you may be thinking, what are you talking about, David? Like, of course a landing page would convert better. Not quite. And I hope we remember to put this in the show notes, but landing pages versus blog posts, landing page versus blog post, let's Google it. Hopefully we're high up. All right, we're number one, right below the Google AI overview answer, which I'm not going to read. Landing page versus blog post, we have examples in that post and beyond that post of blog posts converting as well or better. And I think qualitatively, the thing I would advise readers to think about on this issue is, do you genuinely, in your heart of heart, think you stack up really well with the competitor? Question one. Question two, is it obvious why? Is it just like, we're cheaper and everybody has the same features? Then maybe you don't need a blog post. But if it's like, no, feature by feature, when we get into the details of the feature, or some nuanced way of thinking about the use case or something, people will understand why we're better. Like, if it takes some explanation, consider. I'm not saying a blog post will necessarily do better. I can't predict that, but consider it. Because a blog post allows you, and I'm just going to roughly scroll while I say this, to get into extreme detail, to show screenshots of your product and be like, see, look at this. Both of us claim we have this, but look at the design of how we present that feature to you. Look, this is how, like, we've designed this in a nuanced way that makes your life easier. And look, we integrate with blah, 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 and it's only 1 click or 2 clicks for us, and the other one, it's like more complicated. If you think that there is a good sales pitch, if you were to get into the details like that for you versus that competitor, it could make sense to do it via a blog post. And don't believe or think that just because it's a blog post, it converts worse than landing pages. Just a soapbox on this for one more second. The reason everyone just kind of thinks that in the marketing space is because they're thinking of two different things. They're thinking landing page equals a paid search landing pages where there's a bunch of high intent from like a Google ad, and blog post equals nonsensical top of funnel blog post. So they just kind of think of it that way. Not true. If a blog post is a bottom of funnel topic like this, and it's written really well and sells your software well, and there's like nuance in there, it can convert just as well, if not better.
I have nothing to add. That was good.
So then I'll let you take over, so I'm not the only one talking. A twist on the versus keyword. We talked about your competitor's name versus you, but here's one that I see, I don't know about you, basically nobody who is not a grow and convert client or reader do, which is competitor versus competitor.
Yeah, I don't know if we came up with this, but the idea was formed a long time ago where you can take two competitors that are more widely known than you. And so people that have a bigger brand. So let's say if you were a company that is just starting out in the space and there's a lot of people searching for your competitors to compare them, to basically create a blog post that ranks for your competitor names and then insert yourself into the conversation. So the idea would be, you might only be considering these two options for whatever this product is, but here's a third option that you might have not thought of, and then you can argue why in the blog post that your product makes a better solution for what they're looking for. And so similar to the last post, but the difference is going to be in the framing of the article, making that case for why you should consider your product.
And I think actually, you can correct me, but I think I remember one of, if not the earliest instance that we thought of this. It was a marketing analytics tool, and I believe the keyword was HubSpot versus Google Analytics or something. But HubSpot is obviously, right, really famous. Google Analytics, of course, was, and our client at that time was basically not very well known. And I think we were just looking at versus keywords or something, and we saw, like if this doesn't even mention us, but what if we just talk about this and then say, hey, have you, and then here's who we are. And we've always referred to it internally as crashing the party. They're thinking of HubSpot versus Google Analytics, but you have a sales pitch there against both of those things. And so talk about those two to fulfill search intent, and then be like, and by the way, hello, like this is who we are. You should consider us. And even if you get like, and in this one, the previous client objections that you were talking about, Benji, don't even apply. Of like, why would we talk about our competitor? It's like, dude, they're just thinking about those two competitors anywhere. You're nowhere to be found. If you just siphon off a tiny fraction of those conversions you weren't gonna get anyways.
Yeah.
You weren't even in the like awareness space for that. So it's kind of clever. We are ranking number 2 for this example that I'm screen sharing for this, which is Cypress versus Catalan. And our client then was Rainforest QA, also a client that we have live on the site a detailed case study on. And this is a fun one because it actually has like a 4-way versus, because it's the 3-way versus is Cypress versus Selenium versus Catalan. And I think we were basically trying to rank for permutations
Cypress
of
versus Selenium. Yeah, exactly. All of them had different volumes attached to it. And so I think we were trying to rank for combinations of all the different versus keywords.
And then if we click in, of course, we discuss rainforest in that conversation. And so this is another kind of detailed one where there's different ways to structure this kind of content. You can, and actually this is an important discussion, for these type of multi-product versus, not just them versus you can do kind of 2 types of structure. You can go product by product. So you could have the H2s be like Cypress, here's our rundown of Cypress and its pros and cons, blah, blah, blah. Selenium, here's our rundown of this. And then like Rainforest, us, or whatever. Totally fine. This is not the example we're showing, but I just know we've done a bunch of those. This example is instead go by feature or use case. So by the way, if you're like, what are you guys even talking about? Like, who are these companies? Rainforest is a software QAing tool. So when people build software or websites, they need to QA or quality assurance it, and they use software that is constantly running tests of like, if you click on this button, does it break or not? And there's a bunch of software that does that, and these are a bunch of competitors. Rainforest does it in a no-code way. In this case, we do it by that kind of like feature-based, and in each H2 or section talking about a particular type of feature, benefit, or use case, we then discuss the different tools. So the first example, the only one I'm going to get into, the rest are self-explanatory, is testing the visual layer versus the underlying code. And again, you don't really need to know the details, but you can see the first subsection within that is we say Rainforest, here's how we do that. And then we go into Cypress, then Catalan, or whatever. The second section being who can write these tests and who owns QA. And Rainforest sales pitches, anyone in the team can because it's no code, versus in Cypress, we say this is for front-end developers or anyone who knows JavaScript.
Can you scroll back up to the top again? Because I think that was also important. It's just the framing of this. We haven't talked about alternatives yet, but similar to how we're going to talk about alternatives, what we did in this piece was talk about the downsides that people would face using some of these other products. So here are the challenges that you might run into if you've tried some of these other tools. And then here's the way that our tool solves these problems for your team. As a reason for why should someone even continue reading this article? Because they were searching to compare these 2 other products. And then they come in here and then they're like, okay, I don't get what Rainforest is. Well, if you were to use these 2 other problems, if you were to use these 2 other products, here are the problems that you might face using them. And here's why another solution might even be in your consideration set, essentially.
Yeah. Let me just read out some of these as an example if you're listening along. So, like, what Benji's talking about is the opening sentence is while Selenium IDE, this is like a full name for it, has been popular in automated testing, most teams using Selenium run into these problems. And the like short form of the bullets is only software developers can run the tests. It's costly to maintain. It means paying for additional services. So then it sort of sets up stuff because Rainforest's like selling point is it's no code, so only software developers can run the tests is solved. And then there's various sales pitch for why it's less costly to maintain, and then you don't need to use additional services. The last thing I was going to say about structuring these, and similar, Benji, to what you're saying, what you were just saying, and it applies to alternatives or any of these, is also if you structure these articles on the feature basis as opposed to the like brand or different product basis. So in other words, your H2s are like this feature. How do all three of these compare or whatever? A key thing is you're controlling that conversation, meaning you pick the features and the order in which they appear in the blog post in a way that makes your or your client's solution look good. And that's okay. Like, actually, that reminds me of some other discussion we should have. We've had pushback, in fact, including that example of the early client that we talked about, of people sort of, how do we say this? Like, I guess like clients wanting, being, even if we kind of sell them on this idea, there are some clients that have been like, wanting this to appear or be like a New York Times Wirecutter kind of like neutral third party like review. And in fact, the other day I even ran into a thing I was editing for our team where we were updating old blog posts that the client had written having read, grow, and convert, and it was like the amount of real estate for each was equal, and then they even put like our pick, and it was their own thing, which kind of comes across as a little bit like silly because like of course the person knows whose site they're on. And I mean, you can take over, but in short, our thing is the reader is not stupid. They know, they can see in the top left hand corner what site they're on. When they were on the SERP, they saw who doesn't look at who. Of course, you look at who is writing it. So you go into it like just be upfront about it, and yes, like
Right, like you're talking to someone. I think that's important. And they know who you are. Like if you were a salesperson for this company, you're not going to try to hide the fact that you're a salesperson for the company. You're just going to honestly state, these are our strengths, these are our weaknesses. And I think that is the approach that we try to take to these blog posts is just be upfront. If you're going to name yourself first, that's fine. Because people often object, isn't this biased if you use the whole first section of the post to write about yourself? Well, yeah,
and the
of
answer is
course.
like yes.
Yes, it is biased. It's on your site. You should be selling yourself. And so just do it in an honest way and say, here are the reasons why we truly think we're better. I think just being honest and transparent is the way to write these posts. And I think when people try to hide the fact that they're writing these posts or just say like, here's the pick, it's us, like surprise, like it just comes across as weird because obviously you're making the assumption that the reader is stupid when they're not. So I think you just need to, yeah, come across as honest, transparent, truly state where you're better or where other products may be better. And that's also a good thing to bring into the writing. If someone's better for a certain customer base, just honestly state that. If you're this type of customer, this product might actually be better for you. But if you're in this specific situation or you have these challenges, we might be the best solution. And here's why. I think you need to argue it in that way.
But even what I want to continue and talk about some detail of writing based on what you just said. But before I get into that, be careful that you don't misinterpret what Benji just said to mean that you need to give equal time or real estate to both sides. Even what Benji just said of like, hey, like we're just going to be honest and say this is where we're better, this is where they're better. I have seen clients or writers misinterpret that and think that that has to be equal. I want to emphasize the key point of what Benji and I are saying right now is it doesn't have to be equal, and it shouldn't be equal. That's like borderline weird that clients are thinking it's like somehow weird or somehow deceitful or something to like be selling their own product on a comparison keyword from them. And what we're saying is no, it's not. The opposite is the deceitful one, is to feign or pretend there's objectivity. Obviously you're not objective. They know what site they're on. So just be who you are. So you don't need to give that equal real estate.
I think a good example there would be, imagine if you were to go walk into an Aesop soap store. I don't know why I just thought of that as an example. But then the salesperson, you get in there and someone's wanting a high-end soap, and then the salesperson goes, well, Dove is actually better in these ways, or like this brand, or like another, yeah, you're like, why are you talking about that? I'm in the store trying to purchase your product. It's the same thing. Like your site is your version of the real estate. Like you should be owning the conversation and doing your best to sell why you are better than the rest of the competition.
Oh, that actually reminds me of another phrasing I used to use, or I still use to explain to both our writers when we're teaching them this, and even clients asking about it, is when you walk into that, in that case, soap store. And by the way, if you're like, what is Benji talking about? Like, I don't know about this fancy soap. Neither do I. You just have to know Benji to know about this fancy stuff, like Aesop soap. But anyway, when you walk into that, or here's a more like classic example you'll know, like you walk into a Toyota dealership, like you're sort of saying to yourself, like, I want you to sell to me. And how many times have you, for me, when I've tried to research some software that we need to buy, like the example where this came up the most was we had a client early in the agency. We used to just like do real, like, lo-fi ways of signing contracts. And we had a client being like, no, it needs to be like one of these like certified digital signature tools. And I was like, okay, like DocuSign, it was like the brand name that everyone knows. And then I looked at the pricing and I was like, that seems ridiculously expensive. And we were like early starting out. So I was like all about trying to save money like on every possible instance. And I was like, we don't need this. We're not lawyers. Like, what is some other alternative? And then I found myself Googling DocuSign alternatives. And I was like, oh my God, I am my reader right now. This is amazing. And there, it was frustrating seeing these like software review sites that said nothing. And and that was a classic tool for that. It's so commoditized. Like DocuSign versus competitors is the same thing. You just like click sign. It like does the same thing, right? And so I'm just like, is there anything genuinely better about DocuSign? And I was like hoping, like begging that some Panda Doc, what did we end up going with? Hello Sign. I was just like waiting for someone to just like write a post like we would write to sell themselves, to just be like, DocuSign has these very like enterprisey features that like 99% of businesses don't need. If you just need a signature, we do it and we're cheaper. Like I just wanted someone to just like give me the basic sales pitch. Like you're asking for that. You're just like, give me the sales pitch, I'll figure it out. You don't need to pretend to be objective. Now, that conversation aside, what I wanted to get to is a kind of a higher level writing tip for this, like at the strategy level of writing, not like the word by word level of writing, which is, let's call it controlling the narrative and deciding what that narrative is. So if we go back to what we were talking about when we went on that, very relevant tangent, is structuring the piece by features versus by the different competitors being discussed in the piece. So we looked at this piece with like, one of the features was testing the visual layer versus underlying code. And the second one was who can write the tests and who owns QA for these software QA tools. I said, pick the features and the order that is advantageous for you or your client or whoever you're writing for, right? But there's like kind of like a bigger thing that you need, that would be very helpful for you to kind of get a grapple on, is like, what is our, or my client or whoever's writing, what is our worldview about this product space and how we think the customer should be thinking about making a selection, and what our what our stance in this space is. I know what I said is very theoretical, so let me give an example, which is us. So if you're watching or reading this, you kind of know a little bit about Grow and Convert. We have a very strong stance, which is we if we're writing about, and we have things around like content marketing strategy, Like I think we're in the top for SaaS content strategy or whatever, or content marketing agency and things like that. Our worldview, a lot of you guys know, is content marketing has a lot of like wasted resources on top of funnel stuff that just gets traffic. You shouldn't do that. You should prioritize bottom of funnel because it gets conversions. Look at this data, et cetera, et cetera. So if we were writing a post comparing content agencies or whatever, we would frame the conversation in that worldview, meaning we would try to like first get the reader to think of, to, we would first try to just have the reader think of content marketing in that way.
Yeah, state the problems that they have. So if you're a content marketer, you're likely frustrated by driving traffic that's not leading to leads or something like that. Here's an opposite approach that we take, and then it basically frames the rest of the narrative that goes in the post. And I think that's the same thing that you would need to do here, just like you gave with that DocuSign example. You could say if you're best for small businesses, that framing could be for small businesses. If you're a small business that just needs a signing tool and you don't need all these other features with co-signers and stuff like that, this is a better way to view the space, something like that.
So where I was trying to get at is sometimes this is easy. There are some tools where it's like very obvious what their differentiator is and what their worldview and what their framing needs to be. Very often it is not, and figuring this out means talking to like leadership. So whether you are a agency or consultant and this is your client, or you are in-house, or sometimes you are literally the founder doing this yourself for your own business, like there are many times where like this needs to be a very intentional conversation. And we do this in our kickoffs where we're just like, what is the key differentiator? Or this becomes an in-depth discussion when we're editing the first piece, because all of this, the act of writing the first piece or having Grow and Convert write that for you and going through the editing process brings this up when previously they didn't even discuss it. And all of a sudden within themselves, they're like, that's not how we want to frame it. No, like, this is our best value proposition. And so if you are writing these pieces and you're like, hey, I'm not getting these 7.5% conversion rates that Grow and Convert said, we have seen this happen. We have done, and I think you're working on a post to come out later about some update stats where we were able to update posts that were already ranking high for like these types of growing, converting, bottom of funnel keywords, but the conversion rate wasn't high and our updates increased the conversion rate. These nuances of what you're writing about, how you frame it matter. Like you can't just go through the motions of our strategies and expect the same results. So that's just something I wanted to mention. Like in this blog post, I scroll back up to the intro here. Only software developers can run the test. It's costly to maintain and you have to pay for additional services. Those aren't accidents. We didn't just go to like the drop down here of like their homepage and be like, let's go feature by feature. I'm just going to mention that. This was from careful discussion, editing, and whatever with the client to decide on that. So similarly for Grow and Convert, it's not an accident that we just talk about bottom of versus top of the funnel. That took years to figure out. Okay, enough with soapbox. That's this versus. Last one, which should be a much shorter discussion, is competitor name space alternative. So continuing with Rainforest, I found this to make it easy. We don't have to keep switching products. Testim is some other QA testing or software testing tool. And so testing alternatives is the keyword you would go after. This is something we see very few companies that haven't worked with us or read Grow and Convert or whatever do. These days, I'm starting to see some more people do it. Sometimes we even go for these keywords and we start to see like other competitors having done it. But you see on this particular SERP, our client is number one, our post for them, and then G2 and then Capterra. So it's often like a lot of these software review sites that have done programmatic SEO that rank for these things.
Also, just to bring this up right now, this is often an objection from companies why not to do this, because they're thinking, aren't these SERPs mainly owned by G2 and Capterra? Can I even outrank them? And the answer is yes, because in this case, we're writing way more detailed content than what you would get in a G2. So G2 or Capterra is largely just going to bring up a list of different products. It's going to have like a brief intro. It's all programmatic. And we're actually going to go into the details of why the products are a better alternative than the core one they're searching for. And so we have seen time and time again that you can outrank basically these review sites by just doing a detailed post.
and they're like paid. I want to emphasize that, and why that's important from an SEO perspective. That like the spots that on G2 and Capterra paid is they're not prioritizing it by like the relevancy of the competitor, and Google's algorithm is kind of looking for that. That's maybe a nuanced side discussion. So like if you just mention more relevant competitors, including yourself, you may win. What I wanted to show here is a very non-controversial way of writing these posts. So because these are not verses, and actually we've been talking for a while, so I want to go back to the conversion graph. These alternative ones are the highest converting, period. You can imagine the search intent is ridiculously high. Just like in my story, my real story of looking for DocuSign alternatives, I was like, I had to buy because to sign this client, their legal team was demanding some sort of tool like this. And so I was ready to buy. I was just looking for this like at the last second. So the intent is high. You now don't really need to do anything fancy. They're literally looking for alternatives. And if we go back, the other options, like the G2 option I clicked into, is the most boring list of just like logos and links with like 1 or 2 sentences of description of each product. So like this is what Google's extremely advanced algorithm has determined people's search intent is. So you just need to do the same thing, but you can do it in more detail. The key to that is put yourself first. Again, you don't have to say it in some cheesy way like editor's overall pick #1 with like a wreath graphic or whatever, like a Sundance Film Festival. You put yourself first, and then the second thing, look at how much real estate we give to Rainforest QA. I'm scrolling, screenshots, features, still scrolling, other benefits, still scrolling, more screenshots. Then we finish Rainforest. Now, look at how much space is given to the rest of them. Selenium, 3 paragraphs done. Mabel, 2 paragraphs done. Catalan, 1 paragraph done. This works time and time again. If you're feeling uncomfortable, like, well, this looks biased, scroll back to the part of the video where we talked about that. It doesn't matter. Like, you're giving them your sales pitch. And then it also means you don't need to worry about like, well, our CEO is friends with this other competitor's CEO. The stuff we're saying for the other items in the list are super vanilla.
Usually it's just taken from their site. Yeah, exactly. We're not writing anything bad about them. It's just writing a broad overview. And the last thing I want to cover on this one is just, again, the intro, because I do think that is really important. If you think about someone, imagine they're in Google, they come across this post, and then now they get into it and they see, okay, many teams choose Testim for these reasons. However, teams using this product will run into these problems typically. So just like Davish, where he said, I'm trying to leave this other product, or I don't like this product for these reasons. If you now come into this post and then you have one of these issues, as a reader, you're saying, this company understands me. They know that I'm running into these issues, and you're going to be more convinced to potentially use this product because, yeah, the company understands your problems and they're probably going to understand your solutions. And so I just think going into this level of detail in the intro is very important.
Yeah. And this is something that you're just easily better than on this like G2 random list that just doesn't do any of that at all. It doesn't frame anything. It doesn't say what features are important. None of that stuff. Another kind of framework for writing that we've done for some of these is like, these are the features that you should be prioritizing in this space or whatever, and that works really well. The last thing I wanted to say is this will almost always cover the word, like the company name space competitors. So if you rank for Testim alternatives, if we just Google Testim competitors, it'll be synonymous. We rank #1 for that. Don't at me if you don't, but like every time I've seen it, it's almost the same SERP, so you should be good there.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. You can also get the audio-only versions of these shows wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow us at growandconvert.com/newsletter for any articles and updates for when these videos come out.